They say college friendships can last a lifetime. Mine ended with a single email. I had spent 2 years of my life pouring everything I had into my thesis, my sleepless nights, my tears, my hope for a better future. But when I hit send on my submission that night, I had no idea that someone I called my best friend, my roommate, had already replaced it with hers. It wasn't until months later, when the university called to tell me I'd won a global research award, that I realized the only person who could have done it was her. And by then, the world thought she was me. My name is Emily Carter. I'm 27 years old, and until last year, I believed that hard work always spoke louder than deceit. That belief died somewhere between the walls of my shared graduate housing apartment and the long white hallway of the dean's office at Western State University. When I moved into that apartment 2 years ago, everything felt new. The air, the hope, the pressure. I was starting my master's in environmental science, specializing in renewable urban design. My roommate, Lena Morgan, was in the same program. She was charming, magnetic, the kind of person who could walk into a room and own it without even trying. I, on the other hand, was quieter. I took notes when people talked, I stayed behind after lectures to ask questions, and I was always the one double-checking citations when everyone else was celebrating. We weren't instant best friends, but somewhere between shared coffee mugs and all-nighters in the library, we started calling each other roomie. I helped her with her writing. She helped me with my presentation slides. It was a give-and-take friendship that, looking back, wasn't really equal. I gave more time, effort, trust. She took it all, and I didn't even notice. It started with small things. She'd borrow my flash drives and forget to return them. She'd ask to see my notes, just for reference. Then she started saving copies of my drafts on her laptop for backup. I thought it was sweet. I thought we were a team. I never realized she was building a mirror version of my work, line by line, idea by idea, waiting for the right time to swap places. Our thesis was the final step, a year-long independent research project meant to be original, publishable work. Mine focused on green roof systems for sustainable cities, a topic I'd been passionate about since undergrad. It wasn't just an academic goal, it was personal. My mom had been a construction engineer who always dreamed of eco-friendly housing, but she passed away before I graduated college. This was my way of finishing what she started. Lena's thesis, at least at the beginning, was on something entirely different, coastal restoration. I even helped her edit it once. But somewhere along the way, her drafts stopped appearing. She claimed she'd switched topics to something broader. I didn't think much of it. We were both drowning in deadlines, and grad school exhaustion makes you overlook the cracks in people. The night before submission, I remember staying up until 2:30 a.m. proofreading my paper. My laptop was overheating, and my eyes were burning, but the final PDF gleamed on my screen like a trophy. Version 11_final_final. I named it, the way every desperate grad student names their last shot at sanity. Lena was already asleep in her room. Or so I thought. I sent the file through the university's submission portal, double-checked the confirmation email, and closed my laptop. It was done. I felt like I could finally breathe again. The next morning, she was gone, just a note on the counter. Went home for the weekend. Congrats, genius. You deserve some rest. Love, L. Nothing about that felt strange. Not yet. 3 weeks later, our advisor, Dr. Stevenson, called us both into his office. Emily, Lena, he said, leaning back in his chair. The faculty's impressed. We're submitting both of your theses for external review. And Emily, yours, in particular, shows remarkable application potential. I remember glancing at Lena, who smiled back at me, her face unreadable. Wow, she said softly. That's amazing, Em. Her tone was perfectly measured, supportive, proud, but distant enough to hide something I couldn't yet name. The next few months blurred into job applications, teaching assistant work, and graduation planning. I didn't think about the thesis again until the email came. It was from the International Sustainability Forum, a research organization that annually selects only 3 global finalists for their Innovation in Eco-Design Award. My paper had been nominated, except they addressed the email to Lena Morgan. For a second, I thought it was a typo. I reread the message twice. The title of the paper was mine, word for word. Green Roof Systems for Sustainable Cities, Integrating Ecology and Infrastructure. And under author? Lena's name. My first reaction wasn't anger, it was confusion. There had to be a mix-up. Maybe the university sent the wrong file? Maybe she'd been copied by mistake? I called her immediately. No answer. I texted. Nothing. Hours later, she finally replied. Hey, I'm in London right now. Crazy, right? They invited me for the conference. I can't believe this is happening. I felt my stomach drop.
She didn't sound confused.
She didn't sound scared. She sounded triumphant. My fingers trembled as I typed back. Lena, that's my thesis. Her reply came 5 minutes later. Emily, calm down.
We worked on similar concepts.
It's not a big deal. Don't ruin this for me. I couldn't breathe. Not a big deal. My entire research, the data I collected, the models I built, even the personal dedication I'd written for my mom, it was all there. My mom's name was in the acknowledgments. She hadn't even changed it. That night, I walked to the campus lab and logged into my student portal. My submission confirmation email was still there, time-stamped, secure. But when I downloaded the uploaded file, I froze. It wasn't mine. The PDF under my account had been replaced. The header still had my name, but the content inside was hers. A carbon copy of her formatting, her layout, but my ideas twisted into her version. Somehow, she'd accessed my submission, overwritten it, and re-uploaded her file under my name, then submitted her own, identical version, separately under hers. I sat there in the dim lab light, staring at the screen until my reflection blurred with the glow of betrayal. The worst part? I couldn't prove it. The university's system only kept submission timestamps, not edit logs. Hers and mine were identical, submitted within minutes of each other. The only person who had physical access to my laptop that night was Lena. The same Lena who had smiled across from me at the kitchen counter, pretending to celebrate. By morning, news articles were already out. American graduate's sustainable design thesis wins global recognition. Western State alumna to represent U.S. in London Research Forum. Every headline bore her name. Every quote was something I'd written in my notes. I didn't go to graduation. I couldn't. I told the dean I was dealing with a family emergency, packed my things, and moved out quietly. The university didn't question anything. They were too busy celebrating their rising star. For months, I tried to move on. I took a part-time job at a research firm in Denver, kept my head down, tried to forget. But there's something about injustice that sticks to your bones, like smoke after fire. No matter how far I moved, I still smelled the betrayal. Then, 6 months later, I got a call from the International Sustainability Forum. A man with a polite British accent said, "Ms. Carter, congratulations. We've been trying to reach you. Your work has been shortlisted for the Global Innovation Award." My heart stopped. My work? I asked cautiously. You mean Lena Morgan's submission? He hesitated. We were informed there was a discrepancy in the authorship. Upon review, our academic committee traced multiple original drafts, metadata, and version history, all pointing to your authorship. I sat there in silence, barely breathing. He continued, "We'd like to officially recognize you as the original author. The award ceremony is in Geneva next month. We'll handle the rest." My voice shook. The rest? Yes, Ms. Carter. You may want to check the news tomorrow. The next morning, headlines shifted. University launches investigation into thesis fraud. Award revoked amid academic misconduct allegations. Lena's name was everywhere again, but this time, not in gold. And mine? It was finally on the paper it always belonged to. The morning the news broke, I didn't even have time to make coffee. My phone buzzed nonstop. Messages, calls, emails, even voicemails from unknown numbers. I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the glow of the screen like it might explode. "Emily, please call me back. We're handling this internally, but the press is digging. Can you confirm whether you intend to pursue legal action?" Then came the one that made my stomach twist. "Ms. Carter, this is Dean Walters from Western State University. We'd like to speak with you immediately." I threw on a jacket, tied my hair up, and drove across town in silence. Every red light felt like an interrogation. When I pulled into the parking lot of the old administration building, cameras were already outside. Small crowds of reporters gathered near the front doors, calling names I didn't want to answer to. Emily. Emily Carter. Is it true your roommate stole your thesis? Do you plan to sue? Did you know about the award before she was exposed? I kept my head down and pushed through the crowd, my pulse pounding in my ears. Inside, the air felt colder. The receptionist looked up, recognized me immediately, and ushered me toward a conference room. My chest felt tight, like the walls were pressing in. Dean Walters stood at the far end of the room, arms crossed, expression unreadable. Next to him sat Dr. Stevenson, my old advisor, the man who once told me my work could change cities. His face looked pale now, drawn, like he hadn't slept in days. Emily, he said quietly, motioning for me to sit. We owe you an apology. I didn't move. What's going on? Dean Walters sighed. The International Forum contacted us late last night. They provided metadata analysis, version control timestamps, and an academic verification report. Every draft of the thesis, from your earliest outline to the final upload, originated from your student account. Ms. Morgan's submission appears to have been modified copies of your earlier drafts. I blinked, trying to process. So, you believe me? Stevenson nodded.
Yes.
And the evidence is overwhelming. For a moment, all I could do was exhale. The relief hit me so suddenly that it almost hurt. Walters continued. The university has suspended Ms. Morgan indefinitely. She's under review by the Academic Integrity Board. Unfortunately, his voice lowered. Her actions have brought considerable public attention to Western State. We'll need you to cooperate during the investigation. I frowned. What does that mean? It means interviews, documentation, possibly a hearing, Stevenson explained. You'll have to recount everything from your side, how you shared data, drafts, any instances of collaboration. Collaboration? I repeated sharply. She stole my work. I know, he said gently. But for the record, we need every detail clear. She's denying everything. Of course she was. He slid a printed email across the table. My name and hers were in the thread, one I hadn't seen before. Thanks for reviewing my final version, M. I couldn't have done it without your edits. Submitting now, smiling face with smiling eyes. My mouth went dry. I never sent that. She's claiming you helped her prepare her file, Walter said. Our IT team confirmed this message was sent from your shared Wi-Fi network. My heart sank. She must have used my laptop. Stevenson nodded grimly. We think she logged in that night after you submitted. Her IP matched your location, and she replaced your file with hers under your login. I closed my eyes. I could still picture that night. The hum of the fridge, the soft clatter of keys from her room, the note she left that morning. Congrats, genius. I clenched my fists. I'll cooperate with everything, I said finally. I just want the truth on record. Over the next few weeks, I became both a witness and a headline. News outlets framed it as the Great Thesis Theft Scandal. Every journalist wanted a quote, a photo, a soundbite of the betrayed friend turned whistleblower. I ignored all of them. I spent hours in interviews with the university's ethics panel, re-explaining the timeline over and over. My memories became evidence. My heartbreak became documentation. Lena didn't attend the first 2 hearings. Then, on the third one, she showed up. It was the first time I'd seen her since the night of submission. She walked into the boardroom wearing a crisp navy blazer, hair perfectly styled, her face calm. Too calm. I couldn't tell if it was confidence or performance. Ms. Morgan, the chairwoman of the committee, began, You've reviewed the forensic report. Do you still deny altering or duplicating Ms. Carter's work? Lena folded her hands neatly.
Yes.
I acknowledge that our topics overlapped, but the data, analysis, and conclusions are my own. Emily and I collaborated frequently. She even proofread my drafts. If our work looks similar, it's because we shared ideas. My jaw tightened. I wanted to scream, but I didn't. I let the evidence speak. The committee projected 2 files side by side, mine and hers. The charts, the equations, Even the minor typo in the third paragraph of Section 2, identical. Dr. Stevenson leaned forward. That typo, he said quietly, was one Emily and I caught during her draft review. We laughed about it. Environmental instead of environmental. It appears in your version, Ms. Morgan. How do you explain that? For the first time, Lena hesitated. Her lips parted slightly, but no sound came out. The silence in the room was electric. Then she said, barely above a whisper, I don't remember. That's when I realized she didn't think she'd be caught. She thought I'd disappear quietly, like people like me always did. The ones who worked hard but didn't make noise. The ones who didn't have the charm or the social currency to fight back. But she had underestimated something she couldn't fake. The truth. The board chair looked between us. Miss Carter, do you have anything you'd like to say? I took a deep breath. Yes. I turned to Lena. When I helped you with your essays, when I gave you feedback, it wasn't so you could erase me. You took everything. My work, my dreams, even my mother's name in my dedication. And you thought I wouldn't notice because you believed being louder made you right. She didn't look at me. I continued, voice steady. But I want you to remember this moment. The silence after you said, I don't remember. Because that's the sound of every person you've ever stepped on, finally watching you answer for it. The chair nodded once. That's enough, Miss Carter. I sat down, trembling. 2 weeks later, I received the official decision. Academic misconduct, expulsion recommended. The university made a public statement acknowledging my authorship and apologizing for the oversight in procedural security. It wasn't enough, but it was something. Meanwhile, Lena disappeared. Her social media accounts went dark. Rumors spread she'd fled the country or gone underground to avoid the lawsuit the forum was preparing. I didn't care.
I thought that was the end.
But life, it turns out, doesn't let closure come easy. Because 3 days later, I received a thick envelope from the university marked confidential. Inside were documents from the IT audit, login logs, timestamps, and a memo at the bottom that made my heart stop. File access initiated externally from University Network, 11:47 p.m., April 18th. Source: Administrative Credentials, Dr. Stevenson's ID. My hands trembled. Dr. Stevenson? My advisor? I reread it twice. The file showing Lena's upload wasn't done under her student account. It was authorized under faculty access. I drove to campus immediately. His office door was open. Papers were scattered everywhere. Boxes half-packed. He looked up when I entered, startled. Emily, he said softly. You shouldn't be here. I held up the memo. You used your login. Why? He ran a hand over his face. You don't understand. No, I snapped. I think I do. You helped her, didn't you? He didn't answer. Tears of rage stung my eyes. I trusted you. You told me my work mattered. You told me I was capable. He slumped in his chair. Lena came to me weeks before submission. She said you were struggling, that you'd had a breakdown. She said she'd taken over part of your data to finish the project. I thought I was helping both of you. My voice cracked. So, you gave her access to my file? He nodded weakly. Just to upload her draft for cross-checking. I didn't know she'd replace it. I stared at him, heart pounding. You didn't want to know. He didn't look up. Do you realize what you did? I whispered. You didn't just ruin my trust. You validated hers. You taught her that if she smiles and lies just right, the world bends for her. For the first time, his voice broke. I'm sorry, Emily. I stepped back, shaking. Not as sorry as you're about to be. That night, I forwarded the memo to the university's ethics board and the International Forum's Oversight Committee. By morning, the story had changed again. University professor under investigation in academic fraud case. New evidence suggests faculty complicity. The same reporters who had once shouted my name outside the building now wanted interviews, quotes, a face for justice. But I stayed silent. Because this wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about truth, and I was done letting anyone else tell my story for me. When people say the truth will set you free, they never tell you how heavy it feels before it does. By the end of that week, My name was everywhere again, this time not as the victim of a scandal, but as the whistleblower who exposed institutional corruption. Every major outlet ran the story. The great thesis theft had turned into something much bigger, an inquiry into academic misconduct, favoritism, and faculty cover-ups. I didn't ask for any of it, but somehow I'd become the story. I remember standing in my small Denver apartment, TV flickering silently across the room. My own face, nervous, frozen from a photograph I hadn't consented to, filled the screen under the headline. Graduate student exposes university fraud, professor accused of aiding thesis theft. Below it, a grainy image of Dr. Stevenson flashed beside mine. His once kind, reassuring smile now looked like something else, calculated. My stomach churned. I wanted to turn it off, but I couldn't, because buried underneath the nausea was something I hadn't felt in months. Validation. It wasn't joy. Joy would have felt wrong. It was more like exhaling after being underwater too long. Finally, the world knew. But truth comes with a price tag. By Monday, my inbox was flooded again. Dozens of messages, journalists, activists, even strangers. Some congratulated me. Others accused me of ruining a good man's career. One email, from an address I didn't recognize, stopped me cold. You've made powerful enemies, Emily. Be careful who you trust. No signature. No explanation. I stared at it for a full minute before deleting it. But the words stayed lodged in the back of my mind. That same day, Western State called another hearing, this time for Dr. Stevenson. I wasn't required to attend, but I went anyway. Not for vengeance. I just needed to look him in the eye one more time. The boardroom felt smaller this time, filled with tension thick enough to touch. Reporters gathered outside the door, microphones hovering like vultures. When he entered, he looked nothing like the man I remembered. His usual calmness was gone, replaced by exhaustion. His tie was crooked, his hair unkempt. He didn't meet my gaze. Dean Walters began the session formally. Dr. Stevenson, you've been accused of violating academic protocol by granting unauthorized file access under your credentials. Do you have a statement before we proceed? Stevenson's voice was soft, almost pleading. I made a mistake. I believed I was assisting a student under duress. I did not intend harm. The board chair asked, were you aware that Ms. Morgan was submitting Ms. Carter's thesis under her name? He hesitated. That single moment of silence was louder than any confession. Finally, he said, not at first. I leaned back, my heart pounding. Not at first. That meant he knew eventually. I caught a flicker of realization in Dean Walters' expression, that sharp, quiet shift when truth lands hard. The session went on for hours, detailing the emails, the login logs, the timestamps. I spoke briefly, just the facts, nothing more. When it ended, Stevenson was suspended indefinitely pending further review. He walked past me on his way out, shoulders slumped. For a split second, he stopped. Emily, he said quietly, for what it's worth, I believed in you. I still do. I wanted to hate him. I wanted to tell him belief means nothing without action. But instead, I just said, you should have believed the truth sooner. That night, my phone rang again. A number from overseas. Ms. Carter, a woman's voice said, British accent crisp and formal. This is Rachel Whitmore, Director of Academic Ethics at the International Sustainability Forum. My pulse quickened. Yes, I remember. I'm calling because we've concluded our internal audit regarding your thesis. The evidence fully supports your authorship. The forum intends to publicly award you recognition at our upcoming conference in Geneva. Officially. For a moment, I couldn't speak. You mean me, not her?
Yes.
And for what it's worth, she added, her tone softening, the committee was deeply impressed by how you handled this. Not everyone stands their ground the way you did. I laughed weakly. I didn't feel brave. I felt broken. Often, she said gently, those are the same thing. When I hung up, I sat there for a long time in the dark, staring at the skyline outside my window. The city lights shimmered like scattered hope. I thought about my mom, about how she used to tell me, Integrity isn't about being right. It's about refusing to be wronged silently. And for the first time, I understood what she meant. The Geneva ceremony was 3 months later. By then, the noise around the case had dulled. The university had issued formal apologies, policy reforms, and a new ethics charter. Lena's name had vanished from the academic world entirely. Last I heard, she was living somewhere in Europe, claiming she'd been set up. Maybe she believed that. Maybe denial was the only thing she had left. I didn't hate her anymore. I just felt sorry. When I arrived in Geneva, I was overwhelmed by everything. The grand hall, the murmuring crowd, the feeling of finally being seen. The forum coordinator, a kind older man named Dr. Ellis, handed me a name tag. Dr. Emily Carter, recipient. I froze. I'm not a doctor yet. He smiled. Then consider this a glimpse of the future. When I stepped onto that stage later, lights glaring, applause echoing around me, I felt my hands shake. I wasn't used to applause. I was used to doubt. The moderator introduced me with words I barely heard, something about innovation, integrity, and resilience. Then the microphone was mine. I took a deep breath and looked out at the crowd. When I started my research, I said slowly, I thought the hardest part would be proving my ideas. I was wrong. The hardest part was proving my identity. There was a soft murmur in the room. I lost more than a paper. I lost trust in people I admired, in a system I thought protected honesty. But what I've learned is that truth doesn't need defense. It just needs persistence. Because no one can permanently steal what was born from your own hands, your own mind, your own heart. Applause rose again, loud and long. My throat tightened as I stepped away from the podium. That night, at the after-event dinner, I sat by a window overlooking the city lights. Dr. Ellis clinked his glass and said, You know, Emily, your case is already being used in several universities as an ethics training example. You may have changed how academic integrity is taught. I smiled faintly. I just wanted to finish my degree. He chuckled. You did more than that. I looked out at the reflection in the glass, me, wearing a medal around my neck that should have been mine all along. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel bitterness. I felt calm.
But calm didn't last.
Because when I got back to my hotel room, there was another email waiting for me. No subject line. Just a single sentence. You think it's over? It's not. No name. No signature. But I knew that tone. I knew that arrogance disguised as threat. Lena. The university's investigation had ended, but I hadn't considered that hers hadn't. The email's timing, right after the award, wasn't coincidence. I forwarded it to the forum security office and tried to sleep. I couldn't. By morning, I got a call from Dean Walters. His voice was tight. Emily, we received a legal notice this morning. Ms. Morgan is filing a defamation suit, claims the university mishandled evidence, that your accusation damaged her reputation. I froze. She's suing me? You, the university, and the forum, he said grimly. But don't panic. We'll handle this. She doesn't have a case. Still, my chest tightened. After everything, after proof, hearings, global confirmation, she still found a way to fight back. She's not after money, I said quietly. She's after control. Again. He sighed. We'll keep you updated. Don't respond to anything directly. I hung up and sat at the edge of my bed, staring at the hotel carpet. My victory suddenly felt like glass, clear, beautiful, and fragile enough to shatter at any moment. Back home in Denver, I tried to focus on work, but the anxiety followed me like static. One evening, my boss found me staring blankly at my computer screen long after closing. You okay, Emily? He asked. I nodded, but the truth cracked my voice. I thought it was over. He sat beside me. People like her don't stop because they lose. They stop when they have no audience left. Then what do? He smiled softly. You build something louder than her noise. That night, I registered a small nonprofit, the Carter Initiative for Academic Integrity, a platform to help students protect their work, report plagiarism safely, and advocate for fairer systems. It wasn't revenge. It was reclamation. Weeks later, the forum released a public statement supporting me, dismissing Lena's lawsuit as baseless. She vanished from the media again. But this time, I didn't feel relief. I felt closure. Because justice, I realized, isn't about watching someone fall. It's about rebuilding what they tried to take. And maybe that's what my mom meant all along, that the real legacy of truth isn't just being right. It's being unbreakable. It's strange how healing doesn't come as a grand moment of relief. It comes quietly, in pieces. After months of chaos, I found a rhythm again. The Carter Initiative for Academic Integrity started as a simple website, just a small resource hub to help students secure their research, store data safely, and report misconduct anonymously. I wrote every article myself, recorded video guides, even held free online workshops on protecting intellectual property. At first, I expected only a handful of visitors. But within weeks, messages started pouring in. My professor published my lab results under his name. My co-author replaced my data before our conference submission. I don't know how to prove my work was stolen, please help. Each message felt like déjà vu. A reminder that my story wasn't rare. It was systemic. So I kept going. I partnered with a few ethics lawyers, reached out to academic associations, even spoke on local radio. My voice, the one I used to keep small, suddenly mattered. And people listened. By summer, the initiative had gone viral. A few journalists revisited my case, calling me the woman who turned betrayal into a movement. It was flattering, but it wasn't about that. It was about justice being accessible, not reserved for the loudest or the most privileged. Still, every time I saw my own face online, a small voice whispered in my mind, "Be careful." Because the last time my story went public, someone tried to destroy me. Then came the email that shifted everything again. It was from a private investigator hired by the International Forum. The subject line read, "Follow-up inquiry re. Carter versus Morgan case." Inside, a single paragraph. Ms. Carter, recent digital forensics uncovered additional metadata associated with your thesis file. It appears the upload was facilitated through an administrative account not belonging solely to Dr. Stevenson. We'd like to schedule a confidential conversation. My blood ran cold. I thought we'd already found the truth. But apparently there was more. When I met with the investigator, a quiet, older man named Mr. Avery, he placed a small folder on the table between us. We were in a modest office, no windows, just a desk and 2 chairs. "Miss Carter," he began, "I don't want to alarm you, but there's evidence your case was part of a larger academic scheme." I frowned. "Scheme?" He nodded. "Our analysis shows your thesis data was accessed not just once by Ms. Morgan, but multiple times, and not from her device alone. It was transmitted through a secondary account registered to an external consulting firm." I blinked, confused. "A consulting firm?" He flipped open the folder. There was screenshots, IP traces, server logs. One name stood out in bold. Greenfront Research Partners. The name hit me like static. "Wait, that's the environmental firm that funded our program's research grants." "Exactly," he said. "They sponsored both you and Ms. Morgan. But we've since learned that some of their consultants were offering students editing assistance in exchange for access to unpublished work. Essentially, they were scouting intellectual property before it hit the market." I stared at him. "You mean they were stealing research?" He nodded grimly. "Yes. And we believe Ms. Morgan was recruited, willingly or not, to pass along your findings." My mouth went dry. So Lena wasn't just jealous. She was working for them. Avery leaned forward. "We can't confirm intent yet, but the data transfer logs show your file was sent to their servers the same night she replaced your thesis." I felt a wave of nausea. The betrayal I thought I'd already processed suddenly deepened, spreading like poison. All this time, I'd believed it was personal, that she'd stolen from me out of envy, competition, insecurity. But now, it looked like she'd sold my work to the very corporation claiming to support sustainability. It wasn't just my trust she'd broken. It was everything I believed academia stood for. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying every memory, The way Lena would casually mention Greenfront, how she bragged about their recruiters, how Dr. Stevenson once hinted they were interested in my research. Maybe I'd missed the signs because I wanted to believe the best in people. Maybe I'd been too naive. The next morning, I called Mr. Avery. "I want to help with your investigation," I said. He paused. "Miss Carter, I must warn you, these companies are powerful. They have lawyers' NDAs connections." "I don't care," I said quietly. "They used my mother's ideas, my work for profit. If they built anything with my data, I want to know." Weeks passed. Avery kept me updated sparingly, small details, enough to know progress was being made. Meanwhile, I buried myself in the initiative. Then, one afternoon, an email arrived from a journalist named Laura Park. "Hi, Emily. I'm investigating Greenfront's internal ethics policies. Your case has connections to at least 2 other stolen thesis incidents, both involving students they sponsored. Would you consider an interview?" I hesitated. Part of me wanted to stay out of it. I'd had enough headlines for one lifetime. But another part of me knew silence only protected the powerful. So I agreed. The interview aired a week later on a national broadcast. Laura was direct but kind, allowing me to tell my story without sensationalism. When I discovered my work was stolen, I said on camera, I thought it was just one person's betrayal. But now I realize exploitation hides in systems that reward shortcuts over integrity. What happened to me shouldn't happen to anyone. The clip went viral within hours. #academic-integrity started trending again. Thousands of students shared stories of similar experiences. And with that came backlash. Greenfront released a public statement calling the allegations baseless, accusing me of media manipulation. They claimed their data-sharing agreements were transparent and legally compliant. But truth doesn't need PR. A week later, Avery called again.
"We've got them," he said simply.
"One of their employees just leaked internal emails, and your thesis file is attached. Same version, same timestamp." I sat in silence. So, what happens now? The Forum and the Department of Education are launching an inquiry. Greenfront will face charges for academic fraud and data theft. My throat tightened. What about Lena? "She's been subpoenaed," he said. "Looks like she wasn't just a pawn, she was paid." I swallowed hard. "How much?" $20,000, he said quietly. "Wire transfer 2 days before your submission." I closed my eyes. $20,000. That's all my work, my years, my mother's dream were worth to her. When the news broke again, it didn't explode like before. It spread like a slow, rolling tide. Corporate funding scandal rocks academic world. University research partner accused of intellectual property theft. Emails flooded in again. Students thanking me, professors apologizing, even strangers sending messages that said, "Keep going." But through it all, one thought wouldn't leave me, Lena. I kept picturing her the last time I saw her sitting in that hearing room, face blank, mouth dry. I wondered if she'd even known what she'd gotten herself into, or if she'd sold her soul thinking she could buy it back later. Either way, it didn't matter now, because the world finally knew the truth. All of it. One night, as I sat at my desk drafting an article for the initiative, my phone buzzed with a new message from an unknown number. You were right. No name, no context. But I knew. It was her. For a long time, I just stared at the message. I didn't reply, because sometimes silence is the loudest thing you can say. A month later, Greenfront collapsed under investigation. Multiple executives were charged. The university severed ties with them, and the Forum credited my exposure as the catalyst for reform. I received an official letter from the Department of Education thanking me for my courageous contribution to academic transparency. But the truth is, I didn't feel brave. I felt human again. And maybe that was enough. The initiative grew faster than I ever expected. By fall, we had volunteers across universities nationwide, professors joining as advisors, and even small scholarships for students who demonstrated ethical leadership. The girl who once whispered her story now stood behind podiums, teaching others how to protect theirs. But every time someone asked me how I survived it all, I'd give the same answer. I didn't survive it. I rebuilt from it. Because surviving means you return to who you were before. Rebuilding means you become someone new, stronger, sharper, unafraid. And that's exactly who I had become. Peace came slowly, not as a wave, but as a whisper. 6 months after the Greenfront scandal broke, my life had finally found a rhythm again. The Carter Initiative had grown into something real. We had a full-time team, funding from ethical education foundations and partnerships with several universities across the U.S. Our goal was simple but powerful: to make integrity louder than ambition. I was invited to speak at conferences, podcasts, even a TED Talk. Every time I stood in front of a microphone, I'd feel that familiar pulse of nerves, but it was different now. I wasn't the scared student who had lost her voice. I was the woman who rebuilt it from ashes. People often asked me what kept me going. I always said, truth does not need revenge to stay alive, it only needs space to breathe. And yet, some nights, I'd still dream of Lena. Not the version the media painted, the fraud, the liar, the villain, but the girl I once knew. The one who shared late-night ramen, sang off-key to Taylor Swift, and cried when she failed her first exam. That's the thing about betrayal. It doesn't erase love, it buries it under grief. It was late October when the letter came. I'd just returned home from a seminar in Chicago. The air outside smelled like rain, and my apartment was dimly lit, warm, familiar. My assistant, Claire, had picked up my mail earlier, leaving a small pile on the kitchen table. Among the bills and flyers was one envelope, plain, off-white, handwritten in neat cursive. No return address. Just my name, Emily Carter. Something about the handwriting felt eerily familiar. The small loop in the Y, the careful spacing. I tore it open slowly, my pulse quickening. Inside was a single folded page. The scent of lavender drifted faintly from it, the same scent Lena used to wear. I unfolded it with trembling hands. Emily, if you're reading this, I know you probably hate me. You have every right to. I've thought about writing this for months, but every version I started sounded like an excuse, and I don't deserve the right to explain. But I'm writing now because there's something you need to know before the lawyers, the media, or anyone else tells it their way. When I replaced your thesis, I told myself it was a way to survive. I'd been threatened, not by you, but by the same people who took your work later. Greenfront approached me first, months before you finished your draft. They promised a job, sponsorship, even money for my family. I didn't realize what they truly wanted until it was too late. By the time I saw the full picture, they had access to everything. I wanted to tell you. I wanted to undo it. But fear is a cage, and I lived in it. They didn't just take your ideas. They used mine too. And when I tried to expose them, they cut me out. They leaked your name and left me holding the knife. I know none of this erases what I did. I betrayed you. I used your trust, and I broke it. But please know, I never stopped regretting it. You were the only person who ever believed in me, and I destroyed that. I can't fix what I took, but I hope one day you'll find a way to forgive me. Not for me, but for yourself. You once told me the truth always wins. I didn't believe you then, but I do now. Lena. I read it 3 times. Then a 4th. My chest felt tight, my eyes burning, not with anger, but confusion. She'd written in ink smudged by tears. I sat back on my couch, the letter trembling in my hand. For a long time I said nothing. The hum of the refrigerator filled the silence, and outside, the rain started again, soft, steady, endless. I didn't know what to feel. Part of me wanted to rip the letter apart, to scream that regret doesn't rewrite reality. Another part of me, the part that once saw good in her, wondered if she had finally told the truth. The words "they used mine too" echoed in my mind. I thought about Greenfront's collapse, the executives in handcuffs, the whistleblower Avery mentioned but never identified. Could it have been her? I didn't want to believe it, but I couldn't ignore it either. The next day, I took the letter to Mr. Avery. He read it carefully, his expression unreadable. When he finished, he exhaled slowly and said, "I was wondering when this would surface." I frowned. "You knew she'd write?" He shook his head. "No. But I knew she'd try to reach you eventually. People like her always do. The ones who realize too late what they've lost. Do you think she's telling the truth? He leaned back in his chair.
Partly.
The timelines match. We know Greenfront approached students under false pretenses. What we didn't know was how deep their control ran. Her letter fills a few gaps, including why the transfer was done through Dr. Stevenson's credentials. If she was being coerced, she might have been the one who gave them access. I stared at him. So, she was a victim too?
He sighed.
Maybe at first. But she still made choices. He was right. Fear can explain an action, but it doesn't justify it. Would you like to respond? He asked. I shook my head.
No.
There's nothing left to say. But even as I said it, my fingers itched to write back. That evening, I walked down to the park near my apartment, a quiet stretch of trees overlooking the city skyline. I sat on a bench under a flickering lamppost and reread the letter once more. I tried to picture the girl who wrote it. Was she sitting somewhere alone, haunted by the same memories? Did she really regret it? Or was this just another manipulation? One last attempt to clear her conscience? I didn't know, but something inside me softened, just a little. Because for the first time, I saw her not as my enemy, but as the consequence of a world that rewards deceit and punishes vulnerability. She wasn't innocent, but she was human. And maybe forgiveness wasn't about her deserving it. Maybe it was about me deserving peace. A week later, I gave a talk at the University of Oregon, titled The Price of Truth. It was my biggest crowd yet, hundreds of students, faculty, even press. My slides played behind me, but I barely looked at them. I told my story again, not as a scandal, but as a lesson. I talked about ethics, about courage, about the quiet strength of walking through fire and not letting it turn you to ash. When the Q&A started, a student in the front row raised her hand. She couldn't have been older than 22. How did you move on? She asked softly. After everything? I thought about it for a moment. By accepting that closure isn't justice, I said. Justice is for the world. Closure is for your heart. They don't always arrive together. The audience went silent. Then came soft applause, growing louder, filling the hall like a wave. I smiled, but it wasn't pride. It was peace, fragile, but real. Later that night, as I packed up my things, I found myself writing something I hadn't planned, a reply to Lena. It wasn't long, just one page. Lena, I received your letter. I don't know if what you wrote was the truth, but I choose to believe you meant it. Maybe because it's easier to heal when I believe there was still some part of you that remembered who we were before all this. I can't forget what you did, and I won't pretend it didn't break me. But I'm done letting anger keep me company. You took my work, but you don't get to take my peace. You were right about one thing: the truth always wins. But it doesn't win by destroying others. It wins by outlasting them. I hope you find whatever peace I had to build for myself. Emily. I didn't send it. I folded the page, placed it inside her original letter, and tucked both into my desk drawer, next to my mother's old notebook and my medal from Geneva. Some truths, I realized, don't need to be shared to be complete. They just need to be felt. As winter approached, the initiative was invited to collaborate with a national education board. We began developing digital safeguards for student submissions, encrypted portals, authorship verification tools, even early plagiarism detection. Every new feature felt like another brick in the wall I was building, not against betrayal, but for protection. The last meeting of the year ended with our director saying, "Emily, you've changed the landscape of academic trust." I smiled, humble but firm. Not me. The truth did. And that night, when I came home and saw the faint glow of the letter drawer under my lamp, I didn't feel pain anymore. Just quiet gratitude for survival, for strength, for the unshakable calm that comes when you realize your worst story became your best teacher. Because betrayal had tried to define me. But I rewrote the ending. And this time it was mine. When the invitation arrived, I thought it was a mistake. Dear Ms. Carter, you are cordially invited to speak at the Global Education Integrity Summit in Geneva as keynote representative of the Carter Initiative. The conference will honor leaders who have redefined ethical reform in academia. Geneva, the same city where my life had fallen apart and rebuilt itself. I read the letter 3 times before setting it down on my desk. The last time I'd stood on a stage there, it had been about survival. This time it would be about legacy. The conference was set for May. Bright spring air, soft sun, and the weight of new beginnings. The Carter Initiative had expanded beyond anything I'd imagined. Over 50 universities using our model, hundreds of thousands of students protecting their work, and new ethics standards written in collaboration with major research bodies. It wasn't just an organization anymore. It was a movement, and yet, the thought of returning to Geneva made my stomach tighten. Because every time I thought of that place, I could still hear the echo of my name being called, first as a fraud, then as a survivor. Now, I'd have to face both memories at once. The weeks leading up to the trip were a blur of meetings, media requests, and late-night emails. But one morning, as I packed for the flight, I opened my desk drawer, the one that held Lena's letter, and paused. It had been nearly a year since she'd written. No more messages, no more headlines, no more traces of her anywhere. Sometimes I wondered if she'd disappeared for good. Other times, I hoped she'd found the piece she wrote about. I lifted the folded paper gently and read the first line again. If you're reading this, I know you probably hate me. I smiled faintly. I don't anymore, I whispered. Then I placed the letter back, closed the drawer, and left for the airport. Geneva was exactly as I remembered. Elegant, glassy buildings reflecting the lake, clean streets, the smell of coffee and lilacs in the spring air. But this time, instead of walking alone with a crumpled resume and an empty heart, I stepped out of a car with a team beside me. The Carter Initiative banner hung proudly across the conference hall entrance. Seeing it there, my name, my story turned into a symbol of integrity, made my chest ache in the best way. As I walked through the glass doors, reporters called out, cameras flashing. But their questions weren't about scandal anymore. They were about solutions. Ms. Carter, how do you see technology changing academic honesty? What inspired your verification program? What advice would you give to students afraid to speak out? I answered with calm conviction. Truth doesn't need perfection. It needs persistence. You protect it by showing up, even when it's uncomfortable. Inside, the auditorium was a sea of faces from around the world. The stage was framed by blue lights, a large screen behind it displaying the theme. Rebuilding trust and knowledge. When it was my turn to speak, I took a slow breath and stepped forward. The hum of the crowd softened to silence. I was 27 when I learned the hardest truth about truth. I began. It doesn't always reward you when you deserve it. Sometimes it takes everything from you first, your peace, your pride, your faith in people. But if you hold on to it long enough, it finds its way back. I saw nods across the crowd, people who understood, not just academically but personally. I stand here not as a victim of betrayal, but as a student of it. Because betrayal, when survived, teaches you what loyalty really means. Not to others, but to yourself. Applause swelled, rising and fading like a heartbeat. And to anyone out there who's ever had their voice stolen, I want you to know, it's not gone. It's waiting. It just needs you to speak again. The room erupted in applause. As I stepped off stage, shaking hands and smiling, a conference coordinator hurried over. Ms. Carter, she said, someone from the audience has requested a private word. It's entirely up to you. I frowned slightly. Who is it? She glanced at her tablet. A delegate from the European Ethics Council. Names, Morgan. I froze. First name? Lena, she said softly. Would you like me to decline? For a long second, I couldn't move. The air felt thick. My pulse fluttered painfully in my chest. But then slowly I nodded.
No.
Tell her I'll meet her. They led me to a small garden terrace behind the conference hall, quiet, surrounded by ivy walls and distant lake reflections. And there she was, Lena Morgan. I almost didn't recognize her at first. Her hair, once sleek and golden, was shorter now, shoulder-length, wavier, streaked with natural brown. She wore a simple gray blazer, no jewelry, no pretense. She looked tired. Not in the way people do after a long day, but in the way they do after a long truth. "Hi, Emily," she said softly. Her voice trembled on my name. I didn't answer right away. I just studied her, not as my betrayer, not even as my former friend, but as a person shaped by consequences. "I wasn't sure you'd come," she said. "I almost didn't," I admitted. She nodded. "I wouldn't have blamed you." For a moment, neither of us spoke. The breeze rustled between us, carrying the faint sound of applause from inside the hall. Finally, I said, "Why are you here?" She looked down, then back up. "To tell you something in person that I couldn't write." I folded my arms. "I'm listening." Her eyes glistened. When Greenfront fell apart, the investigators found internal files, my emails, my transcripts, my contract. I was part of it, but I wasn't the only student they used. They had a list. Dozens of us, all desperate, all promised opportunities if we shared resources. I didn't interrupt. "They offered to clear my name if I cooperated," she continued quietly. "I've spent the last 6 months working with the Ethics Council, helping them expose similar schemes across Europe. That's why I'm here." The silence between us deepened. "Why tell me now?" I asked finally. She swallowed. "Because every time they introduce me, they call me by a title I don't deserve, an ethics advisor. And I can't hold that title until I've faced the person I wronged the most." I looked at her for a long time. Her posture wasn't defensive, it was defeated. Her voice carried no arrogance, just exhaustion and humility. "You've changed," I said quietly. She smiled faintly, a sad curve. "Pain does that. I guess we both learned the hard way." I hesitated. "What do you want from me, Lena?" Her answer came softly, almost like a confession. "Nothing. Just to say thank you. For speaking up. For being what I wasn't brave enough to be." I blinked, unprepared for that. "You think I did this for you?" "No," she said. "But because you did it at all, others like me got a second chance." Her eyes filled again, and for the first time, I saw not guilt, but gratitude. And I realized something I hadn't understood until that moment. Forgiveness isn't a transaction. It's a release. So I took a breath, stepped closer, and said quietly, "I forgave you a long time ago." She looked stunned. "You did?" "I had to," I said simply. "Otherwise, I'd still be your prisoner." Her lips parted, but no sound came out. Then, slowly, she nodded, eyes wet, face trembling between relief and disbelief. "Thank you," she whispered. "You have no idea what that means." "I think I do," I said. For a moment, we just stood there. Two women connected by pain, divided by choices, reunited by truth. Then she extended her hand. I hesitated, then shook it. And just like that, the story that had started in betrayal ended in something quieter, not redemption, but recognition. Later that evening, I watched the sunset from my hotel balcony. The lake glowed gold under the fading light. My team was celebrating downstairs, toasting our success, laughing. But I needed this moment, the silence, the stillness, the final exhale after years of holding my breath. On the table beside me was a small white envelope, a note Lena had left before she left the conference. "You were right. The truth always wins." I'm finally learning how to live with that. I smiled. Not because it fixed anything, but because it didn't need to. Some stories don't end with a door slammed shut. They end with one quietly closing and the sound of peace on the other side. When I flew home, I carried nothing extra. No souvenirs, no regrets. Just a sense of completion. At the airport, a woman stopped me, holding a copy of a magazine featuring the Carter Initiative. "Are you Emily Carter?" she asked shyly. I nodded. She smiled. "My sister almost quit school after her research was stolen. Your story made her stay. She just graduated last week." I felt my throat tighten. "That's amazing," I said softly. She squeezed my hand. "Thank you for not staying quiet." As she walked away, I thought of my mom again. Of her hands covered in blueprint dust, her eyes bright with belief. She once told me, "The strongest buildings aren't the tallest ones, Emily. They're the ones that stand after the storm." And maybe that's all I ever was, the building that stood. They say time heals everything, but I don't think that's true. Time doesn't heal. It teaches. It shows you how to live with the pain differently, how to hold it, understand it, and eventually let it go. It had been 5 years since the day my life imploded, since the betrayal, the scandal, the truth that nearly broke me. Now, as I sat by the window of my office overlooking downtown Denver, I could finally say the words that used to feel impossible. I wasn't angry anymore. The Carter Initiative had grown far beyond my imagination. What began as a single woman's fight for her stolen voice had become a global organization, spanning over 30 countries. Universities adopted our ethical standards, research institutions implemented our digital verification tools, and students, thousands of them, share their stories without fear. Every time I opened my inbox, there were letters like, "Because of your program, my professor couldn't steal my data. Your story helped me come forward about my co-author's fraud. I almost gave up. Then I read about you." I kept them all, every message, every small victory, in a folder on my computer titled Proof That It Mattered. Because that's what healing is, really, collecting proof that the pain had purpose. That morning, I had an interview scheduled with a documentary filmmaker who was producing a series on women who rebuilt integrity. The title made me laugh when I first read it. I didn't feel like someone who rebuilt integrity. I just stopped it from disappearing. The interviewer, a kind man named Marcus, set up his camera in front of my desk and smiled. "We'll keep it simple, Emily. Just tell your story like you're telling it to a friend." That made me smile. That's how it began. When the camera light blinked red, I took a slow breath and began. "I was 27 when my roommate stole my thesis," I said softly. "Back then, it felt like the end of the world. I'd built my identity around being honest, hardworking, invisible. I didn't know that invisibility was a danger until someone else used it against me." Marcus nodded quietly behind the camera. I didn't fight back right away, because I didn't think I mattered enough to win. That's what betrayal does. It makes you question your own worth. But the truth, it doesn't need you to be fearless. It just needs you to be willing. And I was. I smiled faintly. Looking back now, I think the betrayal was my greatest education. It taught me what no degree ever could, how fragile justice is and how powerful persistence can be. He let the silence linger, then asked, "Do you ever think about her?" "Lena." I nodded. "Sometimes. Not with anger, though. With understanding. We were both products of the same system, one that rewards shortcuts and punishes sincerity. I forgave her because I needed to be free, not because she deserved it." Marcus leaned forward slightly. "And if she were watching this interview right now?" I thought for a moment, then smiled softly. "I'd tell her thank you." His eyebrows rose slightly. "Because without her," I continued, "I wouldn't have become this version of myself. The one who learned that truth is not fragile, people are. And sometimes, it takes being broken by someone else's lie to discover just how unbreakable your truth is." After the interview, I walked through our office, a bright, modern space filled with plants, laughter, and the soft hum of purpose. My staff was young, passionate, idealistic, the kind of people who believed the world could be better and worked every day to prove it. As I passed by the communal workspace, one of our interns waved. "Miss Carter, you've got to see this." He pointed to a screen displaying a live video feed from our partner university in Kenya. Dozens of students were gathered in a lecture hall, celebrating the launch of the Carter Integrity Program, a curriculum we developed to teach ethics and authorship in schools worldwide. They were holding signs that read, "Our work, our voice, our truth." My throat tightened. I turned to my assistant, Claire, who stood smiling beside me. "Can you believe this?" I whispered.
She grinned.
"Believe it? You made it happen." I shook my head.
"No."
"We did. Because this, all of this, had been born not from victory but from loss." That night, I stayed late in the office, long after everyone else had gone home. The city lights glowed outside, and my reflection in the glass looked older, calmer. I opened my desk drawer, the same one I'd opened years ago, before flying to Geneva. The letter was still there. Lena's handwriting had faded slightly, the paper soft from being unfolded too many times. I read it again, quietly. They didn't just take your ideas. They used mine too. It struck me differently now. Back then, it had been a wound. Now, it was just history. I took out a pen and wrote a few words in the corner of the page. We both survived. That's enough. Then I tucked it back into the drawer for the last time. A few months later, I was invited to Washington, D.C. to receive the National Humanitarian Innovation Medal, an honor I never thought I'd live to see. The award ceremony was elegant, but understated. As I stood on stage, lights bright, applause filling the room, I thought about the girl I used to be, sitting in that university lab, staring at a screen that no longer held her work, believing her life was over. I wish I could have told her, "You haven't lost everything. You've just lost the version of yourself small enough to believe this is the end." When the host handed me the medal, I caught sight of a familiar face in the crowd, an older man, silver hair, kind eyes. Dr. Stevenson. He looked at me, nodded once, a quiet acknowledgement, no words needed. He had resigned years ago, but I'd heard he'd started teaching again at a community college, dedicating his last years to mentoring underprivileged students. Redemption, in its quiet form. When the event ended, he approached me. "Emily," he said softly, "you did what none of us could." I smiled faintly. "You taught me how to think, even when it hurt." He looked humbled. "I'm sorry it took me so long to believe in the right person." "I think we both learned the same lesson," I said gently. Integrity isn't a title. It's a choice, and sometimes it's one we have to remake every day. He nodded, eyes glistening. "You're right." Months later, on the anniversary of my Geneva speech, I took a trip back to my old campus. Western State University had changed, new buildings, new faces, a new ethics department named after the initiative. But walking across that courtyard again felt surreal. The same oak tree, the same library steps where I used to sit with Lena eating takeout noodles at midnight. I found myself smiling, not sadly, but softly, because every scar has a story, and this place held mine. Inside the library, I found a small plaque near the entrance. "In honor of Emily Carter for her unwavering courage to protect truth, integrity, and the voices of those who believed no one would listen." Below it, smaller text read, "The truth always wins." I reached out, tracing the words with my fingers. And in that quiet moment, everything, every sleepless night, every heartbreak, every tear shed on the cold floor of that apartment, felt worth it. That evening, as I walked back toward the parking lot, a group of students passed by, laughing, papers in hand. One of them called out, "Professor Carter?" I turned, smiling. "Just Emily, please." They grinned. "We just finished your integrity module. It's actually kind of life-changing." I laughed. "That's the point." One of the girls hesitated. "Is it true what they say? That your best friend once stole your thesis?" I met her curious eyes, and instead of feeling bitterness, I just smiled. She didn't steal my story. She gave me one worth telling. The girl's eyes widened, then she nodded thoughtfully. "That's kind of beautiful." "Truth usually is," I said. That night, back at home, I sat on my balcony under the soft glow of Denver's skyline, journal in hand. The air was crisp, stars faint through city haze. I opened my notebook and began to write, not about the past, but about what came next. Because stories don't end when justice is served. They end when peace arrives. And peace had finally found me. To anyone who's ever been betrayed, to anyone whose voice was stolen, know this: the truth isn't fragile. It's patient. It waits for you to find it again. And when you do, it will whisper, "You were right all along." I closed the notebook, smiling through quiet tears. Then I lifted my gaze to the horizon, where the first light of morning was breaking through. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't just feel like the woman who survived betrayal. I felt like the woman who rewrote what it meant to win.